Hello, nerds! Welcome to Generally Nerdy. This is a review of The Batman. I am not unaware that this is a little bit late. I am late to the game, and I do apologize for the delay, but I have a day job and other things in my life that kind of got in the way, like the main show that we do here on the channel. So, that being said, we do have to get into this review real quick. So, we're gonna start off a little bit with the things that I think really worked in this. And the biggest thing, the thing that I enjoyed far and above the most about this movie was the camera work. The cinematography in this movie is fantastic. Grieg, maybe? Fraser is the cinematographer that worked with Matt Reeves on this. Matt Reeves also, the director and writer of the movie. Just the camera is a character in this movie, which is not something you can say a lot in modern cinema. The camera gives you as much information, if not more, than a lot of the characters that are on screen talking. So that says a lot about the way this camera moves around. It sets the mood. It shows you the information without beating you over the head with. Well, at the end of the movie, there was one scene definitely where they beat you over the head with information that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. But that one exception aside, this is some of the best cinematography you are going to get in a superhero movie, and that's a lot. I mean, Christopher Nolan is great with cinematography as well, and we're going to hear a lot of comparisons to the Christopher Nolan Batman here because honestly, I still think that is the best live action depiction of the Caped Crusader that we have. So that's the bar that has been set. So we must compare everything to the bar, right? So. But yeah, cinematography right now, the first thing that we're talking about is amazing. It was so good. Sound design as well. I feel like sound design, because I am a sound guy, stands out far and above. It's not as solid as the cinematography because the main theme of this movie was very strange because I kept expecting the rest of the Imperial March to play. Because the main melody line for Batman is dun, 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 dun. Yeah, you went dun, 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 right? It's the first four notes of the Imperial March. Aside from that main theme, though, I really feel like this was a freaking home run from the sound design point of view. The audio depiction of Batman, as far as like the weight that he carries, I feel like was appropriate given what the sound designer was given. I feel like the issue I have with that has nothing to do with the actual audio. The audio was exactly what you would expect considering all of the things going on screen. I just think some of the things going on screen were a little weird, but we're gonna get to that. Anyway, so yeah, cinematography, sound design, fantastic. And Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright is a national treasure, and this man should be in everything. I think Jeffrey Wright is fantastic. He did more with what he was given than anyone else on screen, save for maybe Colin Farrell as the Penguin. So yeah. Whew. Between Jeffrey Wright and Colin Farrell, this was kind of a masterclass of losing yourself in your character. Very much so visibly with Colin Farrell as well. At times, even knowing who was underneath all of that makeup, I still forgot that was Colin Farrell. So Jeffrey Wright, Colin Farrell's performances stand out. They are amazing. The issue I have with Gordon, again, not to do with the actor, a lot more to do with the writing, but we're going to get to that. So the beautiful thing, Colin Farrell just becomes the Penguin, right? But the beautiful thing about Jeffrey Wright's Lieutenant Gordon is that he is so earnest. He is so believable. You really believe that this man can't even fathom that some of the people that he works with could be crooked cops. So when he's proven wrong about that again and again and again, and you see his heartbreak on screen, your heart breaks with him. And he just emotes for days, which makes up for the Robert Pattinson's lack of ability to emote. we're going to get to that as well. So that brings us into, we're going to get into another performance that kind of straddles the line between fantastic and what were they thinking, and that is Paul Dano's Riddler. Paul Dano is a really great actor. He's a really fine actor. I really appreciate his acting ability. He's done a lot more on the other side of the camera more recently. He's been directing more often, but seeing him as the Riddler works. And honestly, if they had done a more traditional Riddler, Paul Dano would have been a great choice for that as well. But the direction they chose to go in is where we kind of get this kind of riding the fence on quality issue. So changing the Riddler is not what I have the issue with. I honestly think that the change that they went with, if they hadn't gone quite so over the top with it, would have been really fun, would have been honestly a breath of fresh air when it comes to Riddler, because I think the Riddler is one of the most underutilized Batman characters because nobody is smart enough to write the Riddler. It would seem that Matt Reeves and his writing partner, who is in my notes, and I can't see his name, and I apologize, Peter Craig, there it is. Matt Reeves and Peter Craig writing the Riddler, they are smart enough to write the Riddler, but they made one choice that I feel like kind of undermines all of that good work, and that is to make the Riddler mentally ill, I guess is probably the most appropriate way to put that. It seems that this iteration of the Riddler is emotionally stunted. It kind of views the world as if he were 14 for life, and obviously he's not. While Paul Dano does look very young, yeah, the Riddler is not very young. I really like what Dano did with it. I think where Dano's performance kind of falls apart is there at the end, and I've already given you the spoiler alert, so you've been warned again. At the end, after he's been caught and he's in Arkham and he's having that conversation with Batman, that's where the effectiveness of the Riddler's character, of this portrayal of the Riddler, starts to fall apart. Dano's performance is still really good. Dano's performance actually is probably the thing that saves this section of the movie, is because he is so believably crazy. But just, you have this weird sympathy for this guy who's actively blowing up the city because he is mentally a teenager, and just barely mentally a teenager. So like it's I don't know, it kind of pulls you in a couple of different directions, and that motion really brings you out of it a little bit. So that's kind of I like Dano's performance. I think that where Matt Reeves and Peter Craig went with the characterization, though, is questionable. So then that kind of bridges the gap between what we liked and what we didn't like. So what did we not like about this? We're going to start with Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne, Robert Pattinson, just in general. I can appreciate Pattinson sometimes. I really liked what he did, the crazy that he portrayed in The Lighthouse. I thought that was very expertly done, but I think a lot of that was because of who his partner was in that movie. The acting partner that he had was Willem Dafoe, who is one of the greatest actors we've seen in the last 2 decades. So I feel like that movie notwithstanding, pretty much everything else he's done has been at best pretty mediocre. Or he's a secondary or tertiary character like The King, where he has to act up against Timothy freaking Chalamet, who also is one of the best actors we've seen in a long time. And so him being a secondary character to Timothy Chalamet's lead in that movie also made that performance a little better. But when Pattinson is the lead, I really have troubles buying what he's trying to sell. Specifically here as Bruce Wayne, the emo, kind of moody, brooding Bruce Wayne would work if he believed the things that he was saying. He's not confident enough to play Bruce Wayne. Even a young Bruce Wayne, I understand, and I'm just going to lay this out to begin with. I really fully understand that this is supposed to be very early in Bruce Wayne's career as Batman, but Bruce Wayne is a highly intelligent character, has been from every iteration we've ever seen since he was a young kid. So the fact that he's in his late 20s, potentially early 30s, as this version of Batman, Bruce Wayne, and he doesn't save anyone, Really? He also doesn't figure out any of the Riddler's clues, any of the larger puzzles, I guess I should say, on his own. Seems a little weird. Or at the very least, just he and Alfred. Alfred does pretty much all of the heavy lifting, save for one example in this movie when it comes to those larger Riddler puzzles. So, and Alfred isn't even on the screen for more than like 5 minutes. So that's... It's just very disjointed. It's a really clunky portrayal of the intelligence. Now, the physicality of Batman, I will give to Robert Pattinson, because again, we're looking at young Batman. He's gonna take a lot more punches. He's gonna take a lot more bullets than he would after he's been a little more seasoned. But this early iteration of Batman, he's gonna jump through windows incorrectly and fall on his face, like we see there towards the end of the movie. And these things are gonna happen, and sure, I get that. But it's not consistent. So we have a Batman who routinely can take out groups of enemies and then all of the sudden can't because plot device. There's just a lot of very convenient contrivances for this plot to happen when it comes to Batman's physicality. I don't think that's Pattinson's issue. I think Pattinson's issue is that he's inconsistent in his believability as far as when it comes to Bruce Wayne. And even when it comes to Batman, the affectation that he has with the vocal worked pretty well for me. There were a couple of slips on that, but I'll allow it because they're minorly noticeable. So yeah, that's kind of where that sits. And then leading from Bruce to Bruce's relationships, actually more specifically Batman's relationship, Batman and Catwoman, that subplot didn't need to happen at all. There is no motivating factor that will sell that story to me at all. The more believable motivation for Selina Kyle's Catwoman, for Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman in this movie, is her relationship with the Russian girl Annika. They imply very heavily for the first half of this movie, roughly, that Selina and Annika have some sort of romantic relationship. She does keep referring to her as her friend when she's talking to other people about Annika, but that can easily be scooted aside because she calls her baby. The nature of their relationship reads more of a romantic relationship than anything that happens between Catwoman and Batman on screen at all in this entire movie. So if you completely get rid of the subplot of Catwoman is interested in Batman in some sort of romantic situation and keep the romantic interest between Selina and Annika, there is much more believable motivation there. So let's absolutely axe that love story subplot and get a more believable version of it, which again, we don't need a whole lot. We didn't get a whole lot, but when you see Annika's body and you see the anger inside of Selina's eyes, and then you see how she reacts with the cop that she then kidnaps later, like all of these things make a lot more sense if her romantic interest is that girl. If she's romantically interested in Batman, then it doesn't read the same. Does that make sense? And so that segues very nicely into the biggest issue I had with this movie, and that is the extra bits. Once we have Gotham exploding, so the movie is roughly 3 hours long. So we're looking at exactly 176 minutes from front to tail. So those 3 hours, I'm not saying was too long because I fully believe that a 3-hour movie is doable. Go watch Dune. But this movie probably could have been shaved down by about 20 to 30 minutes because we got a bunch of extras that weren't necessary. There's a number of times where we are just watching Batman walk across the room for really no dramatic effect. If you're doing it for dramatic effect, sure, that's fine. But give me a payoff. Don't just show me Batman walking across the room and then not have anything pay off from that. This happens probably 3 to 4 times where it's just, or when he's walking very slowly out of the shadows, very loudly. That's the issue with the sound design is, one of the first introductions to Batman in costume is he's walking very slowly out of these shadows. You probably could have shaved that whole scene by about 2 minutes or by a minute and a half, because he just walks so much. You can get the even more effective dramatic payoff if you just have him take a couple of steps out of the dark and not walking down a corridor that's 45 feet long. And then at the end of the movie, I think the place that suffers the most from this glut, if you will, is that once we have Riddler in custody and his plan is not, we're unable to stop him from executing his plan because it's already exploding. We don't also, on top of that, need the crazy Riddler followers with the gun. Like that whole section, there's a whole 10-minute section right there where it's just like, this is absolutely unnecessary. The plot device is already given. We already know that the Riddler is more powerful than we gave him credit for. We don't need this. I mean, an extra action scene in a modern superhero movie, go figure, but this one was not exactly necessary. You could have had the moments with Batman showing that he's more than just a vigilante. The only purpose that this serves is you get one of those Riddler followers using Batman's line of "I am vengeance," which then changes Batman's angle on looking at things, which is effective, sure, but could have been done at a different point in the movie, and then we could have completely lost, again, approximately 10 minutes off of the tail of this movie. So aside from these issues that I have, I do think this is a good Batman. I think Pattinson is a little bit better than Ben Affleck as Batman himself. I would say Pattinson and Affleck kind of are comparable as Bruce Wayne, though if I had a gun to my head, I would probably choose Affleck as Bruce, but Pattinson as Batman. But the bar that we're really comparing this against, one more time, is Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale's Batman. If that is the gold standard for on-screen Batman, where does Pattinson lie? Pattinson doesn't cut the mustard, doesn't cross that bar. He gets close to it a few times, but there's a lot more working against it. Now, that's not to say that I didn't like this movie, because if you haven't already gleaned this, I really did like this movie. It was a lot of fun. Aside from the issues that I had with it, I think that this is a solid entry into the Batman mythos, and I honestly want to see where this is going. I really want to see what they're going to do with the next movie, because the next movie is going to have that cameo at the end be something of a more prominent villain. I'm not saying that he's going to be the main villain, because I don't think that's been announced yet, but he's going to be a more prominent presence in the Matt Reeves universe. So this sets up the characters. Now let's build the world. Let's kind of smooth out those rough edges on those characters while we're building up this Matt Reeves universe. And I think we've got a recipe for a fantastic franchise on our hands. So, conclusion of all of the things, where does that leave this Batman movie in my book? Again, Christopher Nolan is an A+. We're going to put this Batman at a B-. I'm super excited to see where this is going, and I really want to take this ride with you nerds. So if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, let's have that conversation down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all of the things. We will see you in the next video. Before we go though, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.